Book 3, Chapter 15 of Armadale. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Armadale by Wilkie Collins. Book 3, Chapter 15, Part 1. The Wedding Day. The time was 9 o'clock in the morning. The place was a private room in one of the old-fashioned inns which still remain on the Borough side of the Thames. The date was Monday, the 11th of August, and the person was Mr. Bashwood, who had travelled to London on a summons from his son, and had taken up his abode at the inn on the previous day. He had never yet looked so pitiably old and helpless as he looked now. The fever and chill of alternating hope and despair had dried and withered and wasted him. The angles of his figure had sharpened. The outline of his face had shrunk. His dress pointed the melancholy change in him with a merciless and shocking emphasis. Never, even in his youth, had he worn such clothes as he wore now. With the desperate resolution to leave no chance untried of producing an impression on Miss Gwilt, he had cast aside his dreary black garments. He had even mustered the courage to wear his blue satin cravat. His coat was a riding coat of light grey. He had ordered it, with a vindictive subtlety of purpose, to be made on the pattern of a coat that he had seen Allan wear. His waistcoat was white. His trousers were of the gayest summer pattern in the largest check. His wig was oiled and scented, and brushed round on either side to hide the wrinkles on his temples. He was an object to laugh at. He was an object to weep over. His enemies, if a creature so wretched could have had enemies, would have forgiven him on seeing him in his new dress. His friends, had any of his friends been left, would have been less distressed if they had looked at him in his coffin than if they had looked at him as he was now. Incessantly restless, he paced the room from end to end. Now he looked at his watch, now he looked out of the window, now he looked at the well-furnished breakfast-table, always with the same wistful, uneasy inquiry in his eyes. The waiter coming in with the urn of boiling water was addressed for the 50th time in the one form of words which the miserable creature seemed to be capable of uttering that morning. "My son is coming to breakfast. My son is very particular. I want everything of the best, hot things and cold things, and tea and coffee, and all the rest of it, waiter, all the rest of it." For the 50th time he now reiterated those anxious words. For the 50th time the impenetrable waiter had just returned his one pacifying answer, "All right, sir, you may leave it to me," when the sound of leisurely footsteps was heard on the stairs. The door opened, and the long-expected son sauntered indolently into the room, with a neat little black leather bag in his hand. "Well done, old gentleman," said Bashwood the younger, surveying his father's dress with a smile of sardonic encouragement. "You are ready to be married to Miss Gwilt at a moment's notice." The father took the son's hand, and tried to echo the son's laugh. "You have such good spirits, Jemmy," he said, using the name in its familiar form, as he had been accustomed to use it in happier days. "You always had good spirits, my dear, from a child. Come and sit down. I've ordered you a nice breakfast. Everything of the best, everything of the best. What a relief it is to see you! Oh, dear, dear, what a relief it is to see you!" He stopped and sat down at the table, his face flushed with the effort to control the impatience that was devouring him. "Tell me about her!" he burst out, giving up the effort with a sudden self-abandonment. "I shall die, Jemmy, if I wait for it any longer. Tell me, tell me, tell me!" "One thing at a time," said Bashwood the younger, perfectly unmoved by his father's impatience. "We'll try the breakfast first, and come to the lady afterward. Gently does it, old gentleman, gently does it." He put his leather bag on a chair, and sat down opposite to his father, composed and smiling, and humming a little tune. No ordinary observation, applying the ordinary rules of analysis, would have detected the character of Bashwood the younger in his face. His youthful look, aided by his light hair and his plump, beardless cheeks, his easy manner and his ever ready smile, his eyes, which met unshrinkingly the eyes of every one whom he addressed, all combined to make the impression of him a favourable impression in the general mind. No eye for reading character, but such an eye as belongs to one person, perhaps, in 10,000, could have penetrated the smoothly deceptive surface of this man, and have seen him for what he really was, the vile creature whom the viler need of society has fashioned for its use. There he sat, the confidential spy of modern times, whose business is steadily enlarging, whose private inquiry offices are steadily on the increase. There he sat, the necessary detective attendant on the progress of our national civilization, a man who was, in this instance at least, the legitimate and intelligible product of the vocation that employed him, a man professionally ready, on the merest suspicion, if the merest suspicion paid him, to get under our beds and look through gimlet holes in our doors, a man who would have been useless to his employers if he could have felt a touch of human sympathy in his father's presence, and who would have deservedly forfeited his situation if, under any circumstances whatever, he had been personally accessible to a sense of pity or a sense of shame. "Gently does it, old gentleman," he repeated, lifting the covers from the dishes, and looking under them, one after the other, all round the table. "Gently does it." "Don't be angry with me, Jemmy," pleaded his father. "Try, if you can, to think how anxious I must be. I got your letter so long ago as yesterday morning. I have had to travel all the way from Thorpe Ambrose. I have had to get through the dreadful long evening and the dreadful long night, with your letter telling me that you had found out who she is, and telling me nothing more. Suspense is very hard to bear, Jemmy, when you come to my age. What was it prevented you, my dear, from coming to me when I got here yesterday evening?" "A little dinner at Richmond," said Bashwood the younger. "Give me some tea." Mr. Bashwood tried to comply with the request, but the hand with which he lifted the teapot trembled so unmanageably that the tea missed the cup and streamed out on the cloth. "I'm very sorry. I can't help trembling when I'm anxious," said the old man, as his son took the teapot out of his hand. "I'm afraid you bear me malice, Jemmy, for what happened when I was last in town. I own I was obstinate and unreasonable about going back to Thorpe Ambrose. I'm more sensible now. You were quite right in taking it all on yourself, as soon as I showed you the veiled lady when we saw her come out of the hotel. And you were quite right to send me back the same day to my business in the steward's office at the great house." He watched the effect of these concessions on his son, and ventured doubtfully on another entreaty. "If you won't tell me anything else just yet," he said faintly, "will you tell me how you found her out? Do, Jemmy, do." Bashwood the younger looked up from his plate. "I'll tell you that," he said. "The reckoning up of Miss Gwilt has cost more money and taken more time than I expected, and the sooner we come to a settlement about it, the sooner we shall get to what you want to know." Without a word of expostulation, the father laid his dingy old pocket-book and his purse on the table before the son. Bashwood the younger looked into the purse, observed, with a contemptuous elevation of the eyebrows, that it held no more than a sovereign and some silver, and returned it intact. The pocket-book, on being opened next, proved to contain 4 5-pound notes. Bashwood the younger transferred 3 of the notes to his own keeping, and handed the pocket-book back to his father, with a bow expressive of mock gratitude and sarcastic respect. "1,000 thanks," he said. "Some of it is for the people at our office, and the balance is for myself. One of the few stupid things, my dear sir, that I have done in the course of my life, was to write you word, when you first consulted me, that you might have my services gratis. As you see, I hastened to repair the error. An hour or two at odd times I was ready enough to give you, but this business has taken days, and has got in the way of other jobs. I told you I couldn't be out of pocket